All right, well, welcome into the Cris Collinsworth podcast, and we are thrilled to have our guy, our capologist, Brad Spielberger, with us in here. And Brad, good to see you again. I know I wear you out sometimes because I'm so curious about all of this, but so much of what the NFL is anymore, especially this time of year, is all money related.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I think that's the cool part of what I do is you can kind of predict some of the moves that happen and the big trades and the draft picks and all that. You know, you got to follow the money.
So Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, did you have some idea that all that was on the table as we headed into this offseason?
I thought one of Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill, and then I thought one of these 2019 receivers, so A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin. That list is very long. But I thought one person in each of those groups was probably going to be on the move, yeah.
It is just wild. So let's go down. First of all, let's do a little bit of general stuff here. Now, you have this broken down by team as effective cap space and dead money. So effective cap space is what?
Is the amount of cap space you have, but also you have to fill out your full roster. So if you had 40 guys on your roster, you would have a certain number of cap space, but then effective cap space is us filling out your 53-man roster for you.
So basically every team in here, so there's no team in the negative, right? Because they have to be at this number. They have to be over the list. And so the smallest effective cap space, do I have that backwards? No. Okay, so like the New Orleans Saints, you have the New Orleans Saints as the 32nd ranked team. Effective cap space of 8.9 million and dead money of 29.4 million. Is that all Drew Brees?
A lot of it is Drew. Yep, about half of it.
Yeah. So they are the least healthy team in your estimation. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep.
And so what might come out of that if you were looking at the New Orleans Saints and you go, oh, because they have that situation, is it the quarterback that we're going to start talking about? Is it, what is the net result, next steps in your estimation with the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, I mean, it never necessarily predicts one particular move, but you see Teron Armstead, their longtime left tackle, head to the Miami Dolphins. They obviously lost Trey Hendrickson this preseason prior. You have Marcus Williams, their stud safety, go to the Baltimore Ravens on a strong contract. So, look, if they wanted to keep those guys, they probably could have, but it just makes everything more difficult, and it's hard to retain good young talent.
Make the transition at the head coaching position. Sean Payton, I don't know what he's doing, retiring, trying to go to the Cowboys. I don't know what it is that he's doing. Trying to go to Fox, maybe. I have no idea. But Dennis Allen takes over, who has done such a marvelous job. Really, he's been the one guy that's been able to shut down Tom Brady over the past couple of years and give him a bit of a headache. But there are really good teams here at the least healthy end of your rankings. The Eagles, the Packers, the Bucks, the Browns, the Raiders, the Rams, the Cowboys are make up the list below the Saints. To me, that says, hey, you got the Packers, you got the Browns, you've got the Rams who are coming off a Super Bowl, you've got the Cowboys who are always desperate to win. These are, in your estimation, then teams that are just going all in right now?
To a degree, yeah. I mean, I think we talked pre-show. It doesn't necessarily, you don't want to always have healthy cap. If you have a 38-year-old back-to-back MVP Aaron Rodgers, you probably should want to have a non-healthy cap. You want to spend, you want to be able to build around your good players. The Buccaneers, same thing with Tom Brady. Why would you care about your cap health? I put this list out yesterday, and Joe Banner, a longtime NFL exec, said you don't want to have a bad record and be at the top of this list. So yeah, sometimes you got to spend.
Yeah. So let's flip it to the other end of this now. The number one team as far as the healthiest cap space are Cincinnati Bengals, coming off of a Super Bowl. Now, why is that?
Yeah, so it doesn't just look at cap space. It also looks at how many good young rookie contract players you have. So obviously they have number 1 overall pick Joe Burrow, 5th overall pick Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, all these guys who good on the list. So they have very good players that are locked in on cheap deals for now. Obviously Joe Burrow may be a 50 million per year man soon enough, but all of that helps. But they also just, the Bengals, folks like to say they're cheap. I wouldn't call them cheap, but they do not spend frivolously. They sign, mid-tier free agents and they go about their business in a very particular way. And they've maintained a very healthy budget.
So I've been told that all these guaranteed contracts, okay, that the team has, let's say that you give somebody $100 million guaranteed, which teams have. More than that in some cases, that you have to put that money in some escrow account with the league so that it was going to be there. You can't claim you're broke at some point in that contract. And what it does, and I'm just going to go off of what I was told, what it does is really favor people with wealthy owners, people who have cash on hand and can do that. It's one of the reasons that the Rams have been able to do some guaranteed contracts, that they can, it's no big deal. I don't want to say it's no big deal, but it's not as big a deal as it would be for the Cincinnati Bengals or Pittsburgh Steelers to go take $100 million in cash, which they may not have, and put it in some escrow account in New York. Now, am I fairly close on this?
No, you're spot on. So it's Article 26, Section 9. It's called the funding rule. And it was originally put in there back when the NFL was a younger league, and there were legitimate questions of whether owners, maybe would not have the cash on hand to pay the players. Well, I can tell you this, in the last CBA negotiation, the NFLPA pushed very hard to get that out of it, or at least have it augmented in some way. But yeah, essentially, I think it is a way for owners to say, well, we'd love to fully guarantee this money, but we just can't, because we can't put that much money away. And I think that is the thing that we hear all these stories about how everyone's mad at the Browns owners and the Haslams, is because they kind of show that the funding rule is not actually preventing teams from guaranteeing more money.
So is this turning into Moneyball at this point? So are the New York Yankees of football, pick a team, the Rams, the Cowboys, whoever it's going to be, going to come along and gobble up all the Bengals players here at some point because they can't guarantee Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and all those guys? They just literally cannot. They don't have the money to put that kind of cash up in these escrow accounts.
Yeah, so that is the fear. There are some owners, like you mentioned. I think it's funny with the Chargers and the Bengals, who have these huge quarterbacks contracts coming up with Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. Both of those owners you would put in the top 5 of owners that can't put, 9 figures into an escrow account. But at the same time, I think that's the beauty of the hard salary cap in the NFL. I mean, you mentioned the Cowboys, and they lost a lot of talent this offseason, traded away Amari Cooper. Obviously, Randy Gregory goes to the Denver Broncos. So that is what maintains the parity. But at the end of the day, yes, wealthier owners do have an advantage in that regard to some degree.
And the ones with the good stadiums and the luxury boxes, they get to keep that money. And so while baseball, to me, still has the much bigger issue of trying to stay competitive in all their markets, it's starting to creep into football a little bit with some of these things.
Yeah, and I think that all goes back to 2011 when they invented the rookie wage scale. And that made it so that certain clubs could just try to get a ton of cheap assets and win, like you said, Moneyball, kind of like in baseball with the Athletics or the Tampa Bay Rays of recent years, where you can still win and acquire talent while spending much less than everyone else. But then you're going to have the Rams and other clubs that just don't care about that and would rather, pay for wins. And it obviously worked out for them, pretty quickly.
All right, I have one other question for you. Estate taxes. So I was reading an article about the Las Vegas Raiders, and that as long as Al Davis's wife is alive, then everything's fine. It can stay in the family. The minute she passes, now Mark Davis is in a spot, because now the what is it, 60%, something like that, that the estate taxes, whatever the value of that team is, and let's talk about the Denver Broncos at this point. They're talking about $5 billion for this team. So whatever it would be in Las Vegas, let's use $5 billion. So 60% or $3 billion, Mark Davis would have to come up with to keep that team. Now, I've heard all kinds of stories about different ways that owners have gotten around this, but I would think that the IRS is not giving up $3 billion very easily. So are we talking about at some point in the near future that we're going to have to see some of these teams sold?
Yeah, so all these clubs with these, family-owned operations, I think you could throw the Chicago Bears in there as an interesting club as well. The first lady of football, Virginia McCaskey, I want to say she's 100 now. So, I think the same thing happens when she passes away and the team is split between their kids. But yes, you can leverage against the asset that is the club itself, but it's not so much saying that all 32 owners are rich, yes, but the ones that are generating money outside of their football operation, like a Stan Kroenke with the Los Angeles Rams, who's married to one of the Walmart children, the Rams aren't his main source of income, and that is a big part of it.
It is. The deeper you get into this, it's amazing, really. This world of high finance, and despite the fact that these teams are worth billions of dollars now, money is still a factor for some owners in the NFL because they're having to play at that high level. Makes my head spin, but I will say this. I think it's an interesting proposition to begin to look at these individual teams, and we'll at least look at the AFC teams this week and what they're doing, how they're doing it, and maybe what the future holds in your estimation for some of the long-term health of these teams. So I'm going to start with the Buffalo Bills. I think that the Bills in the East are a team that most people would consider certainly one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl this year. So close, and that heartbreaking loss against Kansas City in the playoffs. You've got them ranked 22nd with $16.5 million in dead money and $4.3 million in effective cap space.
So the beauty of the Buffalo Bills and what smart teams have been doing to stay afloat, and the reason why they were able to extend Stephon Diggs as opposed to trade him away like the Chiefs and Packers is they've got a lot of deals done early. You look at Tre'Davious White at corner, obviously coming off an injury, but they signed him for $17.25 million per year weeks before Jalen Ramsey gets $20 million a year. Then Marlon Humphrey and Marshawn Lattimore and all these guys, now Denzel Ward, Jair Alexander, they're all in that $20 million per year conversation. So they did that with Tre'Davious White. They did it with Deion Dawkins at left tackle. They did it with Matt Milano at linebacker right before, Darius Leonard and Fred Warner and those guys got paid. So being proactive and getting deals done early is going to be able to buoy them and help them with some of these high-priced guys. So they're not in the healthiest spot, but considering they have Josh Allen making $43 million a year now, the largest guarantee ever at the time of $100 million fully guaranteed, they're still in a fine spot because they are a well-run front office.
They do manage to pick up Von Miller, and maybe that was a little bit of a surprise to me that, this is it's a young team. It's a team that, has some up and coming stars and sort of health across the board. But we saw Von Miller make a difference for the Rams coming down the stretch. Now, one of the things I would be concerned with is that Von Miller, when healthy, was very good. And because he took off a month plus in the middle of the season, he didn't have to play 17 games and, 3 playoff games. So there's some risk in there. So is it almost now the feeling that, you're going to have to take a few of these one-off flyers on these veteran players and hope they stay healthy for the entire run? Because the Buffalo Bills aren't looking to get in the playoffs. They're looking to raise the Lombardi.
Yeah, no, there's always going to be risk and reward involved. I mean, we love to talk about the Rams, and obviously no one mentions how the Titans traded a second and a fourth round pick for Julio Jones, and he barely touched the field for them. Like, there's always going to be the other side of the coin where you maybe make a big investment and it does not work out. So the Bills, I agree with you. I was kind of surprised by that move. They spent their first and second round pick on edge rushers in the prior draft class and are still kind of trying to improve that front seven and that front four on the defense. Yeah, it's a risky move, but like you said, we also saw what the impact he can make both against the run and the pass when he is healthy.
Yeah, the other interesting one for me is they do draft a cornerback in Kaiir Elam out of the University of Florida. That Levi Wallace is gone. Their other cornerback, and Tre'Davious White, got hurt at Thanksgiving. Some concerns about exactly when he is going to be back. So if there is a little bit of a question mark in my mind going forward, it would be at the cornerback position. Two really good safeties in Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, and Tron Johnson, really good on that in that slot over there as well. Anything else stick out to you? Because the play of Gabriel Davis in that playoff game just jumps off the board at everybody, I think. And now with Stephon Diggs back in the fold, is there anything else that in your mind jumps out? Maybe the drafting of James Cook to give him a little receiving element out of the backfield?
Yeah, so you mentioned Kaiir Elam out of your Florida University. I thought that was one of my favorite fits of the first round. They just needed a cornerback, and I think he's a great player. I think wide receiver. You mentioned James Cook, and yes, I think he will have that slot element to replace some of Cole Beasley's production. But Emmanuel Sanders, even at 35 years old last year, was a very, very good player. Beasley, obviously productive, had a down year, but I do think as good as Diggs and Davis are, one more receiving option, whether that be Cook or an actual receiver, I think that's the last piece for them.
Yeah, and Cole Beasley, so much of it, I think, had to do with sort of the vaccination, non-vaccination. He was, I mean, obviously a good player, but it had to take its toll on him as they went along during the course of the season. Let's go on to the New England Patriots, who I believe, if I remember right, were number 2 on our list here of healthiest teams.
Yeah, that's correct. And the Patriots, they're always, I think, thinking several years ahead and stuff like this. They set the record last offseason for the most total guaranteed money given out in a free agency class. And I really do think in hindsight, they were trying to capitalize on a down year, a down market because of COVID. They got a lot of really good players on cheap deals. Matthew Judon, I think it was a discount, about $13.5 million per year for him, a good edge rusher. Didn't love all the deals, Nelson Aguilar and the tight ends, but they didn't really break the bank. They just spent a lot on solid players. And then they were kind of quiet this offseason, and they have so much room going forward. They're near the top in effective cap space from 2022 to 2024. And they have a rookie contract quarterback. So Mac Jones making, not a lot of money. They can continue to be aggressive and spend around him. And, they're in a very healthy position.
Does it surprise you at all that there's sort of been this exodus continuing now with J.C. Jackson out of the secondary for the New England Patriots? Because if I would have said the one sort of signature part of this defense was that they always had 4 or 5 really good cornerbacks that could play on the back end and play that man coverage. And the other thing that stuck out to me some was the trade of Shaq Mason, Ted Karras coming over to the Cincinnati Bengals, Winovich walking out of there. But offensive line seemed to be a point of flexibility for them. And I was a little surprised. Maybe they just don't want to pay anybody the kind of money that J.C. Jackson was going to get.
Yeah, I think for both spots, corner I think was more surprising because we've seen them obviously be willing to pay secondary, and really they've been one of the teams that pays that position more. Them and the Ravens seem to prioritize secondary players, and without Gilmore and Jackson now, they really are thin at that position. I thought it was interesting too. You mentioned the draft. They trade down from 21 to 29. The Chiefs come up to 21 and took Trent McDuffie, the corner out of Washington, who a lot of people loved and is more of a zone guy, but the Patriots did play more zone defense last year. Obviously, Cole Strange, considered a reach, but probably fills the center spot or maybe one of those guard spots to replace Shaq Mason. But, at guard, they don't spend there. I mean, even Joe Thuney, they franchise tag him. They still let him walk. I just don't think they view it as a position they want to spend a lot of money at.
Yeah, it makes sense. They get a speedster and Tyquan Thornton. It's probably been the weakness of the Bill Belichick era is trying to come up with good wide receivers in the draft. He just has not. Of course, they signed Randy Moss. That was a home run of all home runs at the time. Had the undefeated season, got beat in the Super Bowl. But this is a team, and Cole Strange. I mean, it seems like Belichick does it every year that there's somebody you go, what? And that's exactly what the Rams did when on their live feed. They were all like, what? We had him in the third round. But, if he fits in, and Shaq Mason was a really good player for them for a long time, we shall see. So an interesting choice. Anything else stick out on the Patriots? And now with where they are with their cap space, only $9 million in dead money, but they're still under. I said nobody would be a negative number. You've got them as negative 1.8 million, so they still have cuts to come, right?
So overthecap.com, we're always within about $2 million. There's probably some discrepancies, and I would guess they're 6 figures under the cap right now, because you can never be over the cap. I get asked that a lot. You can basically, if you have 24 hours to fix it, essentially. So they're probably just under the cap right now. I would just say they're interesting in how much they've invested at wide receiver. Like you said, they have struggled mightily to get that position correctly. They trade for Devontae Parker in division with the Miami Dolphins. They keep Nelson Aguilar, who I think a lot of folks thought maybe was on the way out this offseason. I think they've always kind of done this, and maybe you could speak to it, of just quantity over quality at wide receiver. Obviously, Randy Moss an exception, but I grew up thinking it was the way to do it, to just have a bunch of number 2s and number 3s, as opposed to having that high price, number 1, and then some cheaper guys around him.
I mean, we're going to be talking about it all season this year as far as what is the value of a wide receiver. And clearly the tipping point was reached for a lot of teams on these great players. I mean, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. You're like, it's like some of the greatest players in the league, really, moving on from that position. So is it all the quarterback, or do the receivers have a little something to do with it? We're about to find out some of those answers. The Miami Dolphins, to me, obviously one of the most interesting teams this offseason, kind of almost a little bit like the Patriots did last year, where you felt like, oh my goodness, we've never seen them go after it. And of course they had a lot of off-season controversy to go along with all of this as well. But from a pure, what have they added to this team kind of feeling, and it was all offense. It was Tyreek Hill, it was Teron Armstead, it was Cedric Wilson, who's a good player out of Dallas. I mean, he made a lot of plays for the Cowboys. Connor Williams, the guard, Chase Edmonds out of Arizona, Bridgewater backup quarterback, Raheem Mostert, going to add a lot of speed when he's healthy to that mix. But you put Jalen Waddle, the rookie out of Alabama, Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert on the same team. I was just watching today. They're talking about having a sprint championship, and it'll be close. All three of those guys can really go. And then, of course, we get to social media, and the first thing they do is they show Tua Tagovailoa underthrowing Tyreek Hill, and I just started laughing. I go, that honestly is the power of social media, because you could tell. The one thing I know about Tyreek Hill that maybe other people don't know is Tyreek Hill doesn't have half speed, and you could see that Tua was like, he probably wasn't even loose. And Tyreek Hill never runs anything other than full speed. I've never seen anything like it in practice, what this guy does. It's always sprinting at the top end speed. I'm sure Tua's like, dude, give me 20 minutes. I'll get it down to you, but I can't throw it there right now. And it just blew up the internet, right? Oh, Tua doesn't have the arm strength. There's no way he's going to get it down the field. But this is a team now, if you like speed, you like the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, they are true track stars, like you said. I think maybe not the deep balls, but they'll run a lot of the Alabama, the crossers and mesh and all that stuff they did with Jalen Waddle back in the day and Tyreek Hill. And, Tua may throw the ball not very far beyond the line of scrimmage, but you get the ball in these guys' hands and let them go to work. And there are a lot of guys. I also just kind of love Mike Gesicki, the tight ends fit as kind of the opposite of those, just a big body possession guy. Yeah, I mean, they went all in. There is a trend we've seen over the last couple seasons now when you have your rookie contract quarterback going into his third season, because that's, of course, the year where after that year he wants to get extended. He probably will get extended. We saw it with Kyler Murray and the Cardinals last year making all those moves. Even the Giants did it with Daniel Jones. Now they don't even really believe in him. But the year before that in 2018, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, all those guys. So now it's Tua and those guys' turn, and Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. I mean, yeah, the Dolphins, they went crazy, and they're clearly trying to finally make the playoffs after back-to-back winning records and not making the postseason.
Strong at the cornerback position, this team is, with Byron Jones and Xavier Howard. Very good there. And interestingly for me is that they spent a pretty good chunk of change on the left side of their offensive line. So they bring in Connor Williams from Dallas. They bring in Teron Armstead, one of the best tackles in the league when he's healthy, from the Saints. But they're both on the left side, which is great if you have a right-handed quarterback to protect his blind side, but he's a left-handed quarterback. And so typically you would spend that money at right guard and right tackle. But, how do you turn down good players, I guess, is how they look at it.
Yeah, it is an interesting thought. I mean, they have all these draft picks, these premium capital, Austin Jackson, the former first rounder, Liam Eichenberg, the second rounder last year. So maybe they can fill in right guard and right tackle. But that is a good point. I also just want to throw in the most recent move this week. I like the addition of Melvin Ingram as kind of your rotational edge rusher. Probably not a starter at this point in his career, but a guy you bring in on obvious passing situations. I thought that was a great, late season addition.
The New York Jets, and you and I have spent a little time talking about the New York Jets. I am just intrigued. So I look at the AFC right now and I go, okay, it feels like every team in here other than Houston and Jacksonville and the Jets are going to have a legitimate shot of making it to the Super Bowl. And people go, oh, come on. The Cincinnati Bengals made it to the Super Bowl. They had the first overall pick 2 years in a row. So don't tell me what's possible and what's not possible out there. They've added Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, the great wide receiver from Ohio State, Jermaine Johnson, a pass rusher from Florida State, Breece Hall, the running back out of Iowa State. I mean, arguably, you could say of any of those, they could end up being the best at that position coming out of this draft. We just don't know. This is a team that is, clearly trying to get there. They've got the San Francisco offense with Mike LaFleur. Robert Saleh came over from the 49ers as their defensive coordinator. Pick up CJ Usama. I thought one of the real personality kind of leaders, DJ Reed, Laken Tomlinson. They lose Marcus May, the safety. But the New York Jets, coming off a 4-13 year, beat the crap out of the Cincinnati Bengals last year in New York. So it's not like it's impossible. I mean, as you look at the Jets and the Jets' health, your thoughts on this team? You've got them as being still in the sixth best spot in the league.
Yeah, so actually it's funny you mentioned the 49ers. They picked second overall. They took Nick Bosa and Deebo Samuel in 2019, and they played in the Super Bowl the next year. So we really do never know, and this coaching staff has even experienced that. It obviously all comes down to Zach Wilson and what he does, but, if Garrett Wilson's who we think he is, if Jermaine Johnson can make an impact, I mentioned this last time we spoke about this, but Carl Lawson reminds me of a DJ Reader in Cincinnati where he got hurt, missed his entire first year with a new club, but if he comes back healthy and makes a big impact off the edge, this defense takes that step under Robert Saleh. Again, all about Zach Wilson, but they have made so many quality additions on both sides of the ball. Like you said, I don't think it's fair to say they have a 0% chance of making, one of those miraculous runs like we saw with Cincinnati and San Francisco and, go down the list.
I mean, I really find it just so interesting that Zach Wilson is the second-year quarterback. I think almost universally, most of us, when he came out of college, out of BYU, we looked at him and said, that guy's got it, right? He's got it. And we saw him make some great plays. I remember the run down the sideline where he kept cut back, scored a touchdown, all that kind of stuff. Now you've got two running backs in Michael Carter and Breece Hall. Garrett Wilson comes in with Corey Davis at the receiver. C.J. Uzomah in there as well. Elijah Moore is a good player on offense. I just feel like if there's a team out there that could make a jump this year and surprise everybody, because I don't look at the East as being like the North or the West, you know, where you're just going to have murderer's row every single time you play in the division. But the Jets, maybe they're that team this year.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a lot of the big names too, and I think they addressed their depth, in a good way as well. I mean, at tight end, also Tyler Conklin from Minnesota, who I think is a good number 2 tight end. The interior of the offensive line now has depth behind it if they have some injuries. Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're a fun dark horse that could just take that leap. Like you said, I had a guy tell me this year's combine, Zach Wilson had the best arm talent he's ever seen. This guy worked in the league for, I want to say, 25, 30 years. So that stands for something.
Yeah, I've always really liked Robert Saleh. I believe in the philosophy of Mike LaFleur and that whole Shanahan system, although it's sort of like I remember back in the days when the 46 defense of Buddy Ryan and everybody's like, what the hell is this? And nobody could do anything against it. And pretty soon the whole league was running it. And then everybody figured out how to beat it, but when it was unique, it really was that much different. Now it seems to be that defense that everybody's going to be playing. But they've got good young players, Elijah Vera Tucker, Mekhi Becton. They've got guys up front that certainly know how to play. All right, let's go on to the Cincinnati Bengals now. Let's move it over to the Central, because the one thing we've seen in the playoffs last year, or we saw, was that it was the Cincinnati Bengals, a 4 seed, going against the Rams in the Super Bowl, a 4 seed. Both number 1 seeds got knocked out in the first round, playing at home. Green Bay did. San Francisco beat them. Tennessee did. Cincinnati got them. So now we're going in, and my thought is that, okay, let's not pay so much attention to who has the most wins, and there's only one bye now. Let's pay attention to who gets healthy, but more importantly, who's really playing tough football games every single week, because they're battle tested. Because it could have easily been the number 4 seed Bengals against the 6 seed 49ers, because the 49ers should have won that game. They blew it. I mean, they dropped the interception. They just blew it. But this is a division now with Cincinnati coming back, and they fixed their 2 problems. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. Their offensive line had major issues a year ago, and they signed Alex Kappa, Ted Karras, and Lyle Collins. So 3 out of the 5 positions should be new. They lose Uzomah, but they come back and sign Hayden Hurst, who was a first-round draft pick of Baltimore a few years ago, has been playing with Atlanta. And then they go in the draft, and the Bengals go secondary. I mean, they really do. They go Daxton Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt out of Nebraska in the first 2 rounds, and pick up another pass rusher from Florida, Zachary Carter. So the Cincinnati Bengals now, young team, great talent all the way around the skill positions, and they're a team that I still think they're going to be a headache for people this year.
110%. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but in the preseason, or not even preseason, but during, training camp, and folks were saying how Joe Burrow's knee didn't look good and he couldn't throw the deep ball and he wasn't on the same page with any of his receivers. And then it became about how Jamar Chase kept dropping the ball in practice. Like they really could get even better, which probably should scare some teams. But I also do love the point about these good divisions where they're playing competitive football at least 6 games a year against their division. And then obviously some other, tough outside of their division scheduling. It makes these teams battle tested. And I think they are, come playoff time, we have to kind of throw the records out a little bit and focus on quality wins and quality games. Like you said, I mean, the Bengals also got blown out by the Jets. So there's always going to be wacky results. But at the end of the day, the teams that have seen it, that have gone through it a lot, they seem to rise up at the end of the year.
All right, Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Bengals are your number 1 team on your list. They're the healthiest as far as the salary cap goes. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm going to assume after Big Ben, are somewhere in the middle here. Where are they?
They're at 7.
So they're sort of poised and thinking that that maybe their time is coming here. But it is a big leap, despite the fact that they have such a good defense, to go, okay, I've got Kenny Pickett, a rookie, and Mitchell Trubisky, who's a retread, and Mason Rudolph at the quarterback position. And yeah, I've got a great defense. And yes, I have some tremendous weapons on the outside. But are the Steelers going to be competitive in this environment, especially looking at that dead money number there, $26 million is effectively that they've got to deal with that will not be helping his team this year?
Yeah, they're a fascinating team to me. They deserve a lot of, laud and praise for how they handled, usually when teams come out of this, veteran contract quarterback, like, even Tom Brady, New England, they had a couple down years, and the Steelers were able to, they got a pay cut from Big Ben at the end there, but were able to stay healthy. Like you said, the defense is still very, very good. They signed Levi Wallace from the Buffalo Bills and kind of shore up that secondary. I think Stephon Tuitt, whether he returns or not, is a big deal for them. But to me, you mentioned the weapons. I think if you were to pose the question of, maybe the Cincinnati Bengals are the answer to this question, but factoring in age and all of that, which group of weapons in the NFL would you want to start your team with? Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth at tight end, and Najee Harris at running back. That is a stellar unit. I think they had a good free agency, adding some offensive line help and Mason Cole and James Daniels. The quarterback, though, that's the big question.
What's really interesting is when I watched Kenny Pickett play, I was like, okay, he looks the most pro-ready of these potential draft picks. It didn't surprise me that he was the first one taken. Malik Willis probably the one with the most upside as I was watching it. But Kenny Pickett also throws the ball at 3.9 seconds per throw. And I think about, and that's it's ridiculous on an NFL level, which is about 2.5 seconds. But Ben Roethlisberger, when he was at his best, was probably around 3.9 seconds. He was moving around. But do you feel like that their offensive line has the ability to protect at that level? This is a entirely different thing. Mitchell Trubisky is a guy that wants to run around some too. So is Kenny Pickett. Is this just going to be one of those, the offense and in particular the passing game is not ready. So we're going to play defense and we're going to hand the ball to Najee Harris and we're just going to try and hang in there to the fourth quarter and see what happens. So with all those weapons, is it going to end up being wasted on a year of developmental stuff at the quarterback position?
No, it's a great point. It probably is their easiest path to winning games is just, limiting possessions, keeping the ball out of the opposing offense's hands and doing all those things. Like you said, Big Ben had the fastest average time to throw last year. They barely held on to the ball longer than 2 seconds, much less 2.5. And I think offensive coordinator Matt Canada would love to do some different things. He likes to threaten teams to the sidelines and do a lot of jet motion and all these different things. And I think that'll go better with a Mitch Trubisky and or a Kenny Pickett. But yeah, it does come down to, can they have a passing game in a passing happy NFL in a tough division? With Baltimore will probably be teeing off on them. Cleveland will be teeing off on them. Cincinnati, obviously, with Hendrickson and those guys will be teeing off on them. So it's all going to come down to that, and that might be too much to to overcome.
Yeah, it's a tough division. It surely is, but you just keep thinking about, they don't lose. They go to the playoffs. Tomlin's that good, all those different things. But the path for the Pittsburgh Steelers feels the toughest to me out of this division for them to get there. Let's go on to the Cleveland Browns, who ended up with an 8-9 record a season ago. Obviously, big changes there with Deshaun Watson coming over whenever it is that he's available to play, and Amari Cooper. Those are two great players that are new to a very good Cleveland Browns team. And I'm going to go back to it again. The Cincinnati Bengals, if they had not beaten the Kansas City Chiefs in the 16th game of the season, I'm not sure they beat the Browns in the 17th game to get the opportunity to do what they did in the playoffs. So now here we are, and Deshaun Watson, the first fully guaranteed contract that we've ever seen, and we know what his issues are off the field. there's going to be people that will never forgive them for signing Deshaun Watson. There's going to be people that go, Baker Mayfield. Now what are you going to do with him? Now you killed yourself with the dead money and everything that goes in there. And you've got a likely suspension coming for Deshaun Watson. As you step back and look at this talented team that's added Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper, a great receiver out of Dallas, give me where you think this is headed with their cap space now being one of the worst in the league.
Yeah, so, one of the 5 components that goes into the rankings is just a valuation of the roster. So it's just, we put a dollar figure on how good we think every player is, and the Browns are first overall in that metric. I mean, it is a remarkably talented roster. I think the Amari Cooper trade in hindsight now looks kind of genius, giving up just a 5th-round pick, and he's on a 3-year, $60 million deal. Normally, that wouldn't look like a good deal, but now in this current wide receiver landscape, I think they made out pretty well there. I mean, there's just talent all over this defense. It sounds like Jadeveon Clowney could be back soon as well to shore up that defensive front. It all comes down to, does he get suspended this year? Does he maybe get suspended the year after? But yeah, I mean, that contract, $230 million fully guaranteed. Aaron Rodgers had broken the record with about $101 million fully guaranteed a week before. So he more than doubles it. It changes everything. And there is a lot of pressure to win. He's probably going to get, you think a 4, maybe 6 game suspension at some point, but it also sounds like that might come in 2023 and not even 2022.
We're going to find out. What's really interesting to me is what happens with Baker Mayfield. I mean, because now there's been sort of no interest in trading for Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo, that we've got these 2 other quarterbacks kind of hanging out there. And I think most teams are waiting for them to get cut. Don't you? I mean, isn't that the way this is looking now?
Yeah, how often do we have an excess or a surplus of quarterbacks? It's pretty rare. But yeah, I think so. I think with Jimmy G, that shoulder surgery just turned a lot of clubs off, and they just said, at this point, we'll wait and let San Francisco make a decision there. And with Baker, too, I had some incorrect info previously. I thought originally any money he earned elsewhere would offset against his Cleveland money. That's actually not the case. So he can double dip, as it's referred to, and actually whatever someone else pays him will be in addition to his Cleveland about $19 million 5th-year option. So he obviously is in no rush either, and I'm with you. I think at this point, we have to assume they might just get cut around camp.
Bizarre. All right, Baltimore Ravens now. The Ravens were a team just decimated by injuries last year. It was brutal to watch, especially in their secondary. And they're going to get everybody back for the most part. They also, I thought, sort of struck it rich in the draft with Kyle Hamilton, a great player out of Notre Dame, falling to, I think it was the 14th pick, Tyler Linderbaum, who was universally considered to be the best center, and a guy who was an athlete. Now, you want to talk about what he might be able to do with Lamar Jackson in the running game and pulling in front, and I could see them doing all kinds of gimmicks. David Ojabo, the Michigan player who tore his Achilles, being in there. This is a team that got much better. Travis Jones, I think, was the huge defensive interior guy. Who knows what that'll mean but they've always liked the big Michael Pierce kind of guys inside, so maybe he fits that mold a little bit there as well. But just getting healthy again and being able to take the field with healthy bodies and add in some of those guys as well. Lamar Jackson was basically out during the stretch run of the season as well. But this is a football team that I think most of us around here are thinking, look out. You put Marcus Williams now with Kyle Hamilton and Chuck Clark at safety and Marcus Peters back and Marlon Humphrey back on the back end. This is going to be a very good football team.
100%. Even with average health, they should be a playoff team. I'm with you. It's my favorite, futures bet is betting them to make the playoffs and or to win the AFC North. I think there's good value there because, I think people are just underestimating how decimated by injury they were. And then in typical Ravens fashion, they had a great draft. You mentioned Michael Pierce. They actually brought Michael Pierce back. And I think Travis Jones out of UConn will learn behind him how to be that, that interior guy. Yeah, I think they are going to be a playoff team once again, as long as Lamar Jackson is even close to, 2019 Lamar Jackson. And look, Marquise Brown was good. He was productive last year, but to get a first round pick, and yes, they gave a third round pick away, but to get a first round pick for Marquise Brown, I thought was a slam dunk win for the Baltimore Ravens. They're just a well run organization. And you got to think, like you said, that secondary could be not just the best in the league, but one of the best secondaries we've seen in a couple of years.
They really are. I'm interested to watch Marcus Williams play back there as well. He's always been able. He, of course, had the one horrible play and the Minneapolis Miracle and everything that has been associated with that. But he has been an outstanding player. He really has, and so it's going to be fun to watch. The Tennessee Titans, as we come back, that I almost have to remind myself on occasion that they were the number one seed because it ended so quickly for them a season ago. But there's a reason that they were the number one seed. They were in a lesser division, the least division, so they had some softer games, and I think that probably showed up on them at the end of the season. They didn't get very good quarterback play out of Tannehill in the playoff game either. And now one of the big questions for them is going to be, where do they come out on your list, by the way? 19th. So they're kind of in the middle. And so one of the big question marks for them is going to be, or a couple of them, is now, okay, you're sure Tannehill is going to be the guy this year, but Malik Willis at some point is going to factor into this thing. They make the deal for A.J. Brown, ship him off to the Philadelphia Eagles, don't want to pay him, and draft as close to a clone of him as they could find in the draft, which was Treylon Burks out of Arkansas.
Yeah, no, I respect their honesty with themselves. I think John Robinson, the general manager, he actually broke into tears at the combine, and I think he realized last year was kind of the year. I mean, everything was firing. They also had a ton of injuries, but yes, their division's weak, but they beat the Chiefs, they beat the Bills. They had some big wins last year, and obviously it all kind of fell apart come playoff time. And yeah, I think Tannehill, I think they realize he's probably not the guy. He has 1 year of guarantees remaining on his contract. I wouldn't be surprised if they have a new, if Malik Willis is starting in 2023. And then for A.J. Brown, I mean, look, a phenomenal, dominant player, but as you mentioned, everyone's favorite comparison for Treylon Burks was A.J. Brown, and instead of paying A.J. Brown $25 million per year, they're paying Burks about $4 or $5 million a year. So, they're retooling, they're starting over. I think this is also kind of the new NFL trend of don't chase mediocrity, kind of hit the reset button and try to get back faster, and I think that's what they're trying to do.
The only one we didn't mention was Robert Woods coming over after the injury from the Rams. Good player there as well. So it's going to be, I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure, though, on Treylon Burks to come in there and make those kind of plays because they're obviously going to rely on Derrick Henry running the football. So the play action, the RPO games, all the different things that come with that. But you've got to have the guy to make the plays. Robert Woods certainly will, but Treylon Burks in college anyway, he averaged 8.5 yards after the catch. And watching him on tape, he did not get caught by SEC defensive backs. He had long runs, long plays, and I think he's just another one of those big, long, strong guys that sometimes the 40-yard dash is probably not the best indicator of their speed and what they're able to do going down the field. The Indianapolis Colts, So the New York Jets were one of my teams that I said, we need to keep an eye on this team. To me, the Indianapolis Colts might be the top of my list for that one this season. I mean, this is just a team that feels like, to me, they give up Carson Wentz. He goes to Washington. You bring in Matt Ryan. You bring in Yannick Ngakoue. Two really good players. And the thing about Matt Ryan is he's just been getting his ass kicked behind that offensive line in Atlanta for the last couple of years. That's not going to be the case anymore. This is a team that's going to run the ball with Jonathan Taylor. They've got a good, solid offensive line in front of them. Frank Reich knows how to protect his quarterback. I just think that if Matt Ryan has 2 or 3 years left in him, and I don't know of any reason why he wouldn't, this feels like the right fit for him at this point in his career.
I'm with you 110%. I mean, no disrespect at all to Phillip Rivers, but I don't think he was the same caliber of player in 2020 that Matt Ryan is right now. And that team almost went into Buffalo and beat them, in the playoffs. It was, a phenomenal playoff game. This team is better than it was back then as well. I think they've shored up a lot of weaknesses along the defensive line. I think growth from some of their younger players will obviously make a difference. I think adding, Alec Pierce, the wide receiver out of Cincinnati, for another receiver opposite of Michael Pittman. Yeah, I think this is a talented football team. We talk about how important the quarterback position is, and they've basically been a playoff team 2 years in a row with guys that I do not think are as good as Matt Ryan.
Yeah, T.Y. Hilton probably at the end of his career, I would think at this point. I'm just a big believer in the philosophy of what Frank Reich does. I think they were unfortunate get beat by Jacksonville at the end of the year, but they do that every year. I have no idea why Jacksonville can beat one team, and it's the Colts when they come to Jacksonville. So anyway, that to me is a very, very interesting team that I think is going to be a big threat. Especially because they should end up with 4 wins. I just said they can't beat the Jaguars, but they should beat the Texans and the Jags 4 times next season, and that goes a long way towards getting you into the playoffs. The teams at the bottom of the list, as far as the talent, there are 2 teams that I would say probably are the only 2 teams in the AFC I don't think are going to have a chance to make it to the Super Bowl, but who knows? The Texans and the Jaguars. The Texans did a lot of things that I really liked. I thought their draft was certainly interesting with Stingley, the cornerback. Kenyon Green, I think, is a very athletic offensive lineman. Got him listed at guard, but I would not be surprised if he ended up as a tackle at some point. Jalen Petrie out of Baylor, who is a just baller. And this John Mechie, who is the other wide receiver at Alabama, but made a ton of plays for them during the course of his career. He got hurt as well at the end, probably a big reason why they didn't win the national championship. Had too many wide receivers hurt in the mix. But it does now put a lot of pressure on, okay, we've now got to see what happens at the quarterback position here, right? And are we going to stay with Davis Mills, or is this just that tryout year to figure out? Because I think he was the top recruit in the country coming out of high school his year, had some injuries, had some knee issues, but they like him.
He made some plays last year in some games, and it may not have been in the most meaningful of games, but he made some plays that you said, I get why he was a high recruit coming out of high school. I think the big thing for them, I agree with you, I actually like their offseason a lot, but it still, to me, just got them to a place of, can we truly evaluate Davis Mills? Can we figure out what we have here? And I think they can. I think they have enough of an offensive line. I like Nico Collins and bringing back Brandon Cooks. Like you mentioned, also adding John Mechie. And the defense, too. I mean, Steven Nelson is a nice addition at cornerback opposite Derek Stingley. Look, are they going to be a playoff team? Probably not. Are they going to contend? Obviously not. But I think it is a good enough roster. They didn't spend a ton. They still have all this flexibility going forward to at least evaluate what you have in Davis Mills.
All right, moving on to Jacksonville. Is this a team that I should be paying more attention to? So you've got the player of the decade coming out of college, at least by most estimations, in Trevor Lawrence. I thought he did some really good things. I saw him in Cincinnati when they played on a Thursday night or whenever that was, Monday night. One of the games I could actually watch. Trayvon Walker, always going to be, a part of, should they have taken Hutchinson? Who knows? We'll find out soon. Devin Lloyd, one of my favorite players in this draft, a guy who just was a dynamic leader for Utah at the linebacker position. Great rusher coming up the middle. But this is a team that is going to need a lot. Travis Etienne is going to be back hopefully this year. But they really changed up the wide receiver position. Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, both come over. Evan Ingram comes over from the Giants at the tight end position. So have they now put enough around Trevor Lawrence to make this thing work?
Yeah, I mean, they obviously added Brandon Sheriff at right guard as well. I think it comes down to Doug Peterson, frankly. I think the talent, it's enough. I mean, they spent like crazy. They had to pay the Jaguars tax, as it's referred to overspend on a lot of these players. But I mean, they have talent on the roster. I think it comes down to just having a coach that can just get everyone organized and on the same page and working towards a common goal with each other. And if you're a Doug Peterson believer, then I think that you should be optimistic. It also goes back to, like you said, the division. Maybe the Titans have a down year. Maybe if Matt Ryan doesn't gel as well as we think in Indianapolis, they can kind of sneak in by just winning a poor division.
Anything stick out to you, cap related, about this football team at this point?
I mean, they spent like crazy, but it all comes back to the rookie contract quarterback. I mean, when you have a guy like Trevor Lawrence, this is probably what you should do. I mean, each deal, I didn't like the Zay Jones deal, didn't like the Christian Kirk deal. The Foye Oluokun, probably, a good guy, but that deal was insane. I mean, but at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter when you have Trevor Lawrence on a rookie contract.
All right, we're going to come right back in just a minute and finish off the AFC West, talk about the Kansas City Chiefs in just a minute. All right, here we go with our continued look at the money and the impact on these rosters for the 2022 season. We're now down to the AFC West and the Kansas City Chiefs with Brad Spielberger. Brad, this probably for most fans of the Chiefs, kind of a sad offseason, right? I mean, you hate to see Tyreek Hill not playing there. It was just a guy that was, a fan favorite and a league favorite, really. Explain why that happened.
Yeah, we saved the best for last year, didn't we? Yeah. So, I mean, with the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is what we talk about, we saw one team, get rid of a bunch of high-priced players while the rest of the division spent a ton of money. But, I mean, the salary cap is real. There are, restrictions on what you can do. Their defense was very untalented, especially at edge rusher and some of the more premium positions. At corner, they couldn't keep Travarius Ward. You go down the list, I mean, they just were not able to spend and build around the rest of this offense. They still have Orlando Brown on a franchise tag trying to extend him. So long answer short, Tyreek Hill, obviously a dynamic player, a game-changing player, but to make him the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL, the point of having a Patrick Mahomes is not having to have the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL.
It's an interesting point. I'm gonna make the counter argument with this one. Now, obviously, Marquez Valdez-Scantling comes over from the Packers. Juju Smith-Schuster, Valdez-Scantling is a sprinter. He's a go guy. He's somebody that's going to be able to make up for some of that loss of speed. But you also wonder, what impact does this have on Travis Kelce? Because you had two, right? You had Tyreek and then you had Travis on the other side. And so there was nothing you could do. You couldn't double team both of them and then stop everything else on the field. It was just too much. As you've seen over the years, and they lost other players, but to get those two guys back in return, so no Byron Pringle, no Sammy Watkins, no Tyreek Hill, no DeMarcus Robinson. So there's a lot of changeover at the wide receiver position. But Juju and Marquez Valdez-Scantling is historically, when you've seen teams make those big moves, what happens next? I mean, are we seeing it come back to haunt, or is it just about the quarterback position?
Yeah, I mean, it can go either way, but generally it does seem to suggest the quarterback. I mean, as long as you have a guy there who can find open players, can spread the ball around, they're obviously going to lose some efficiency, at least out of the gate. But you mentioned Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I think it was crucial to get a guy that can take the top off of defense to open up the underneath for both Travis Kelce and now Juju Smith-Schuster. There's going to be some growing pains. We're not going to have those highlight reel 80-yard touchdowns like we're used to seeing. But I do think at the end of the day, if the Chiefs want to sustain a dynasty and be a competitive team for a longer time, this is probably the smarter move by the numbers.
Whoo, that one had to hurt. I can just imagine what that was feeling like when they were in there. But, in fairness to Tyreek Hill, that's what somebody's willing to pay. And I don't know what else you'd do about it, but it's going to be really, I mean, you can't get more interesting in this offseason than what happens to Aaron Rodgers without Devontae Adams, what happens to Patrick Mahomes without Tyreek Hill, what happens to Ryan Tannehill without A.J. Brown. You go right down the list, and I'm really intrigued by that, because we're going to come out of this season with one or 2 points of view is that, yeah, the quarterback's important, but you better have some great player go with him. Or once you have the quarterback, it really doesn't matter who the receivers are. And we're cranking them out so fast. I mean, you think about all these drafts. I mean, there's just player after player after player that can play. And you find guys in the second round, the third round, the fourth round, the Antonio Browns of the world that can come in and make a difference at the wide receiver position. Would you have done it? When you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, I know it's a loaded question, but I mean, they spent a lot of money on this offensive line. They got Orlando Brown and Joe Thuney, and they've got a couple of good rookies up there right now. They made changes on the defensive side too. I mean, was it just necessary at this point?
Yeah, it is a tough question, but yeah, my answer is yes. I mean, I referenced it before, but my frame of reference for everything is just those New England teams when I was growing up. And all they did was let good players walk or trade them away. Chandler Jones, Nate Solder, you go down the list of all these, really, really talented guys. And it's probably why they were so good for so long. You do have to hit in the draft. I liked the Kansas City Chiefs draft a lot. Things have to go right, but yes, if you want to have a window now to win, you keep Tyreek Hill. If you want to have a window of the next decade, you probably don't.
Tyrann Mathieu, no longer there. Chiefs, one of the most intriguing teams, and so it now begins to show up. Okay, so the team that went out and spent the money and went out and got Davante Adams, and you're talking about a big deal. That was a big deal. Can you put that deal in perspective as far as what the Green Bay Packers got and exactly what the Raiders had to give up to make that deal happen?
Yeah, so when you're on the franchise tag, if a team wants to sign a player to a offer sheet and try to poach them away, it costs 2 first-round picks. And so basically the Raiders gave just below that with a first and a second-round pick. Green Bay obviously can take that and add a bunch of young, good players. Devontae Wyatt, obviously the defensive lineman. They had Quay Walker, the linebacker, both guys off that Georgia defense. They go ahead and add Christian Watson by trading up the wide receiver out of North Dakota State. I mean, it shapes, multiple spots on your roster when you move on from a Devontae Adams. But I'll say my answer there is probably different than Tyreek Hill. Rodgers is also obviously an elite quarterback, but I just felt like Devontae Adams was the most important offensive weapon to his team in the NFL by honestly a decent margin.
Other than the quarterback position.
Sure, yeah, right. Non-quarterback value to their offense, I think he's number one.
Yeah, it's reunites with Derek Carr, who he played with in college. They both sort of let it be known that that's exactly what they were hoping to have happen. And it sort of blurred a couple of other moves that the Raiders made. Obviously, there's a lot of great things happening with this team, but Chandler Jones coming over to pair up with Max Crosby, that creates some interesting possibilities there as well.
100%. And the reunion with that New England front office that he played for so long ago. But yeah, I mean, Yannick Ngakoue is a fine player, but Chandler Jones is on another level when healthy. And I think him and Crosby teeing off, could be an extremely productive edge group. I like the defense in general. I like adding Bilal Nichols on the interior. They just made a lot of smaller moves that I liked as well. I like the trade of Yannick Ngakoue to get a good young corner in Rock Ya-Sin. They just, I think they're going about business in the New England way. There were some pieces there already. The offensive weaponry now too. I mean, if you get a healthy Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller on top of Davante Adams, they could be an explosive team on both sides of the ball.
Jalen Hurts, pressures on him. Tua Tagovailoa, pressures on him. We got you, Tyreek Hill, right? And same thing's true with Derek Carr. You go out and you get arguably the best receiver in all of football. Pressure's on you now. I mean, you take your team to the playoffs. They get very close against the Cincinnati Bengals. Comes down to the last play of the game. They don't win it, but it is time. It's go time now. And Josh McDaniels comes in there. Expectations are going to be very high very soon for this Raiders football team.
Yeah, Carr has a ton of pressure on him. He did take, what I would describe as a team-friendly deal. He characterized it as such, and I would agree with that assessment. But yeah, he has zero excuses to not win, to win a playoff game. Forget making the playoffs. You got to win 1, maybe 2 playoff games pretty soon.
The other team that is probably under pressure at this point, the LA Chargers. Obviously, I always think of sports teams in one city as like sibling rivalries, and whether it's the Reds and the Bengals or it's the Chargers and the Rams. And in this particular case, they saw the Rams go win a Super Bowl championship. They arguably have a better quarterback in Justin Herbert on their team, who's on a rookie deal. They go out and get Rashawn Slater, a tremendous rookie pass protector a season ago. They're going to add Khalil Mack in a trade from Chicago. They get J.C. Jackson, the best cornerback off of the Patriots team. This is a team that right now is just loaded for bear, right? I mean, Brandon Staley's going to be under pressure. This is a team that expectations are going to be through the roof.
Sky high, and they should be. When you have a guy like Herbert, you have to be aggressive like we talked about. And I think the big thing for them, too, is they had no depth. And so I think you add guys like a Kyle Van Noy after he gets cut in New England. You add a bunch of other pieces as well in case you do have some injuries on both sides of the ball. I love the Zion Johnson pick in the first round. He was my favorite interior offensive lineman. I think you could put him at right guard, maybe kick Matt Filer back out to right tackle, which is probably the biggest weakness on their roster right now, but he has experience there in the past. Yeah, I think on paper, you could argue they have maybe the best roster in the NFL or one of them.
Yeah, to me, because there's so much action going on around them in the division. Obviously, Russell Wilson coming to the Broncos. What's happened with Tyreek Hill? What's going on with Devontae Adams coming to the Raiders? They're the least noisy, if you will, in this offseason, but they should be a winning team. Yes, it's a very tough division, but if you just said, all right, let's take a look at which teams we think have the most talented of the rosters, I'm not so sure as of right now you wouldn't say Chargers, and with Russell Wilson, potentially even the Broncos. To me, this is a division that I'm trying to be objective because it's hard to not go, all right, Kansas City and the rest of them, right? Because we're just so used to doing it, or Green Bay and the rest of them. But this is a Chargers team that's built to win right now. And I think that expectation is going to weigh very early on this team.
Maybe that's the one thing, working against them is the pressure, and they probably haven't had a ton of that, as Chargers. But yeah, they have to. I mean, they have to make the playoffs, in my opinion. Anything less than playoffs is a failure of a season.
Final one, Denver Broncos, 7-10 a season ago, which people will forget about. It's like, hey, they won 7 games last year in this division. Not in the division, but, having to play teams in this division. And now you add Russell Wilson. They make the big deal, the trade from Seattle. They get, so many different guys that are going to give them a chance. But Russell Wilson being plugged into this team right now, how did that deal happen? How does somebody make a deal for Russell Wilson to come and hopefully put this team right back to the top of the heap?
Yeah, what's fascinating about them is I think there's 2 philosophies of, find your quarterback and then build around them. And I think the newer method, obviously the Rams did it and some clubs have done it, is the Buccaneers with Tom Brady as well, is when you hit on a bunch of draft classes and have a really good roster outside of quarterback, I think teams are fed up with trying to find their guy in the draft. Just go out and get a known, proven, commodity like a Russell Wilson. This is a loaded roster. I mean, I think it's probably one of the better offensive lines he'll play behind in the last decade, maybe his entire career. He obviously has a ton of weapons in Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick and all these guys. The defense was kind of hurt for them last year. They get Bradley Chubb hopefully back. This is a loaded roster. I think George Payton, their general manager, has been phenomenal out of the gate coming over from Minnesota. I think he just gets it. I think he just understands how to build a winning culture and a winning roster. They also have a ton of pressure on them, but Russell Wilson's used to that.
I think universally when we talk about rosters in the NFL and which team, but for the quarterback, had the best roster, it was probably the Denver Broncos. That's gone now. Now you've got Russell Wilson on your team. If you had the best roster, you should be able to win right now. I mean, you look at what Randy Gregory, Patrick Surtain, Justin Simmons on the back end. I mean, they've got guys that can play on this football team. And I can't, I'm like this with the whole AFC though. You go down the AFC North, you go down the West, you look at the top end of the East, and could it be the Jets coming back on this season? I think the AFC is as interesting as it's been since the 70s, when you had all those teams just beating each other up, trying to knock off the Pittsburgh Steelers and keep them out of it. You think about some of the great teams that the Raiders had during the course of that era, the Miami Dolphins had during the course of that era. And they were just, the Raiders, any other era, probably go to the Super Bowl 3 times themselves during the 70s. And I'm not so sure that we're not now seeing that again in the AFC, that this is just a league that's as good as any I've seen, maybe in the time that I've been around it.
It's easily, for me, I can't even, the disparity is crazy. I got to ask this question of, pick the 4 teams in the AFC West, which is honestly an impossible question. But I said the team that comes in 4th place in the AFC West could probably win the NFC East and the NFC South this year.
I think that's a valid point. And they're only going to get better. The old steel sharpens steel and all that kind of stuff. They're only going to get better as the season goes along, just like what happened a season ago when Cincinnati came out and when the Rams came out and ultimately won it. We're going to do this for the NFC. Brad, good news for you. You get to do this again. That'll be great. But it is so important for the football fans out there to begin to understand how the money ties directly to this. And for my own sake and for your sake, I hope you enjoy it.
Absolutely.